In this video, I make enough progress that I can take this wagon out into the desert and try it out. It ends in complete failure, but it was a lot of fun along the way. Now I gotta figure out which tire is locking up. It might be more than one, but I'm gonna start with this one. This one seems like a good possibility. When the hub is so corroded, the center knob falls off. There might be more issues back there. So no matter what, I was taking this off anyway, so we're gonna start there. And, oh yeah, that tire doesn't turn at all. So, that's coming apart. I've got the hub and the first bearing out on this wheel. I left the tire on so that I can use it as leverage to try to get that drum off, because it's still stuck and I think the brake shoes or something stuck on there. So, we're gonna try to yank this thing off of here. Oh, we're moving. Yep, that'd be the problem. Yeah. This shoe is supposed to be attached to that other part of the shoe. Well, we know what went wrong. Luckily, the bearings look good. They're all nice and greasy, so I don't think I have to replace those. The shoes, on the other hand, might be an issue. Because, yeah, they both came loose. Alright, well, now we know what happened. Now it's time to fix it. The rubber cups on this wheel cylinder are already falling off. I see lots of things coming out of there. So obviously those cylinders are shot. These adjusters are probably frozen, so I'm going to soak those down and basically get this ready, so if I ever decide to do brakes, I can do them pretty easy. I popped the wheel cylinder out so I can match it up with the other one, because that thing is rusted solid. Hose came with it, so that's perfect. I'm going to leave the shoes in here for now, and I'm just going to go ahead and throw the wheel back on without the wheel cylinder or anything, because well, I want to drive this around, and that's stopping me from driving. And if I don't have brakes, they won't stop me. So, perfect. Sure, the 50-year-old grease that's already in here will be fine. Rolls perfect now. I'm over here in my spare axle stash. Most of these are the solid hub style, but this one right here is the axle out of that CJ5 Swamp Buggy. Now when I dragged this one out of the woods, the wheel didn't turn at all. These brakes are locked up solid. But check this out. The hub works. So I'm going to steal this hub. There we go. We'll have this off here in no time. Well, I noticed in the standard method of bouncing up and down on the back, this shock absorber seems to be not quite functional. I think it's locked up solid. The only thing that seems to move is the tire. Let me give it a try. Did you see any movement there? I know I didn't. So I'm going to do a suspension upgrade by removing the shock absorbers. Just removing them, not replacing them. The thing I think that might be giving the most trouble, this round thing that used to be a nut. I'm not sure how that's going to come off. I don't see any threads of any kind. So we're just going to put a socket on it and see what happens. Well, there's a 9/16. Kinda grabs it. I know that's a 5/8 nut, so 9/16 is one size down. Or I should say I know this used to be a 5/8 nut. Yeah, nothing's happening there. That's just round. Alright, time for the universal wrench. There we go. There. No more binding from that shock absorber. I got all 4 shock absorbers out. I only had to cut one of them out, so that was good. The rest actually unbolted. I'm going to show them to you, and I'm going to put these in order from the least improvement to the most improvement. This right here was almost a good one. It has fluid leaking out, obviously, but it actually has fluid in it, moves and dampens motion. So this actually was a working shock absorber, and probably would have lasted a couple months while the fluid pumped out of it. So I could very well have left this on. But for the sake of improvement, it's going in the bin. Next, this was the other front one. This one, well, that was water. Yeah, so it has water dampening it. I actually thought it was empty until I just did that. But so this one probably could have lasted a couple days easy. It might have even dampened some motion. So again, could have left it on, but yeah, in the bin. We have the passenger side rear one. You might notice it's slightly bent, but it moves. It allows about a ½ inch of suspension travel. So we did improve this corner somewhat. Even though it was moving, it was somewhat limited in its articulation and range of travel. Then we have the one I had to cut out. And yeah, that's the inside of the shock absorber. It actually rusted all the way through, and the inside is rusting up. And that did not move at all. Also looks like it was slightly bent. Maybe, who knows. But yeah, this one I think I have substantial improvement in this corner. So throw away 4 shocks, big suspension upgrade. So we're all set now. But some of the rubber bushings look real good. So I'm gonna save those in my bushing bin, because can't be a hoarder without saving this kind of stuff. Well, I learned something today. I've been chasing this motor thinking it has 0 compression, because I tested it with a gauge that I've used before, and it has 0 compression. And I've used this gauge in other cars and it's worked. I've also checked this gauge against my air compressor and it worked. So that motor really seemed like it had no compression. I got a comment suggesting I check the line and the valve. I did. The line was clear. The valve, I just tapped the end, it opened and closed and seemed to seal properly. The one thing I didn't check was the spring pressure on this valve. I've got this motor up to temperature and cooled it down like 3 or 4 times now. So it definitely has a chance to have everything seat in a little bit. So we're going to do another compression test. Now, one suggestion I got, I already checked the line, it flows clear. But I did get a suggestion that this Schrader valve might be stuck closed, and that's why I'm never reading any pressure on the gauge, even though I know the gauge works. So I'm going to pop that out. And here's the valve. I already checked this with air. When I press it, it released nicely. It looks like it's fine. Maybe the spring pressure is heavy and it's not letting it blow out. I'm not sure. But I'm going to go ahead and swap this out for another one and we'll see what we have. Now, there's absolutely no restriction in this line. You blow right through it. And of course, I hoard used valves too. So let's find one with the lightest pressure I can find. I found one here that has no spring at all left, so that should blow off real easy. Let's see how that works. Well, that's a totally different result. So, lesson learned. That little tiny valve is critical. I've come to realize this is entirely my fault. I removed that Schrader valve in order to use this hose to pressurize the cylinders in that cheap race motor when I was changing the valve springs. I must have put the wrong Schrader valve back in because I got a little bin of them. And the new one I put in had way too much blow-off pressure. So I did it to myself. Now I know, now I have a solution, and I know this motor's not that bad, so I'm gonna keep going with it. I also put on that stubby little carburetor that wouldn't work before, but that was before I fixed the ignition. So let's see if this little short one will work so I can get my height back down low again. Let me show you some of the upgrades I've made. First off, I actually grounded the wire on the fan so it doesn't have to be as a pair of vice grips to hold it on. I added an exhaust system. Now, because it's hanging out the side here, there's a lot of leverage on it. I actually braced it to the bell housing bolts. So there's a brace under there. That way the whole thing can rock with the motor and it still stays pretty rigid and not all the weight is on the manifold. So I just have it temporarily hose clamped on for now to see if I like it. But for now, it's not going to hurt the motor and it's a lot quieter. Not that it was that loud with a straight pipe anyway. I've also added a floor board and a seat. Found an old boat seat that wasn't using for anything for some reason. But that's in there. So that is that Solex carburetor. I threw the air filter off Project Frogger. Need to steal an air filter. That one looks about the right size. That I knew that would fit a Solex, and apparently they're the same size. And it sits now real low. The highest thing is the oil fill cap. Then of course I got the brake turning again by removing the shoes. So that's pretty much fixed. I have my suspension upgrade by removing the shocks, so that's pretty much done. So with all these successes, I think it's time for another test run. Time to take care of a few more things. First thing I need to do is some kind of brakes. Now, eventually I'll get the hydraulic brakes working, but not today. I did notice there's cables coming out of the rear drums for emergency brake. I'm going to go ahead and use those and have that be my braking system. Now, I figured I could use some kind of lever to operate it, and I remembered I had this. This right here is a, well, 1930 vintage, stolen from that Oldsmobile in the carport there. It's in one of the parts I'm not going to use for that project, but has a little ratchet mechanism, nice big lever, and it has a linkage that hooks to threads. It's a fine thread 5/16. So I pretty much can bolt this on, and I've got most of it there, and all I have to do is connect this to those e-brake cables, and I have brakes. If the e-brake cables move, they might be rusted solid. So anyway, we're going to go with that. Got my emergency brake lever here, and this end, it's a 5/16 fine thread. Got some threaded rod, but of course this is coarse thread. But old stud from a manifold, I think this is one of those Mopar Magnums. Fine on one end, coarse on the other. I can go ahead and thread that in the adjuster on the fine side. Then take a coupler nut, attach that to the stud, and then attach the threaded rod to that. There. And I've got a linkage. Now I just have to find a place that'll go straight through all the way to those e-brake cables. I've got this emergency brake all mocked up. All the linkages in. I got it clamped in. I got some brackets. I got some braces. I got a linkage going all the way to the e-brake cables. And yeah, the e-brake cables are seized solid. So this doesn't actually work, but it would. If I could actually move those brake shoes in the back, I would actually have brakes, and the ratchet works. I would have emergency brake. Everything would work fine if those cables moved. So I'm just going to assume they're going to start working randomly. I soaked them down with some oil, and maybe they'll start moving. But the brake lever's in place. So now that I figure I've got brakes conquered by removing shoes in the front and having ineffective brakes in the rear, I'm going to move on to making it drive better. I'm going to make the front drive shaft connect so I can have four-wheel drive. Now there's a reason I haven't done this yet. And the reason is I put a CJ5 transfer case in this, and that uses a different size U-joint. We've got the CJ5 uses this little yoke. The FC-150 one is much bigger. I have the drive shaft for the CJ5 here. You can see it's a much smaller U-joint. That's never going to fit. So I got to do something. Now I actually have the front axle from that CJ5 with the right yoke. The smart move would be just swap out this yoke with the one that fits and bolt it all together. Problem is I can't crack that nut on either this one or the other axle. They're frozen solid. Also, I like the bigger style U-joint. It's going to be stronger, so I'd rather not change this out. And since I couldn't take it off anyway, I figure that's a sign to switch that to the other end and change out the transfer case. Now the problem here is I don't have a drive shaft for a CJ5 or an FC-150 that fits, but I have a spare drive shaft from that J10 I just put together. Right here. That fits the yoke fine. The weird part is, this one is almost the exact same length as that CJ5 one, within a ½ inch. It's about a ½ inch longer, and I will have to remove this CV joint end, but that's what the end I need anyway. It just so happens that J10 front drive shaft is almost exactly the length I need. It might be a bolt-in with the right U-joints. All I have to do is pop that off, and then I have to change the transfer case yoke, which means I need to find a larger style transfer case output for a front. Let's go look in the parts shed. Okay, over there I got a Dana 20, which probably has the right yoke, but that's kind of buried. And that's all rusted solid, so that might be tough to get apart. Got another T90, Model 18 transfer case. Let's see, how lucky are we? We are that lucky. That's the big style. So if this output will switch over to the other transfer case and the J10 drive shaft will fit, I might be able to have this thing be four-wheel drive pretty quick and easy. There we go. Now the nut in this CJ5 transfer case yoke is noticeably smaller. It's 1 1/8 instead of the 1 1/4 of the bigger yoke. I'm hoping it's the same size shaft, because if these aren't interchangeable, I have a problem. That means I'm slicing and dicing drive shafts. But hopefully we get lucky and they just put a small self-locking nut in the CJ5s with the small style U-joint because they didn't have room for the bigger one. Hopefully. They look the same. Let's see if this fits. There. We're in. There's one thing I noticed, and I'm glad I did before I started installing this. The bigger yoke uses this castle style nut, the larger diameter one. The smaller yoke used this self-locking nut. I was going to go ahead and use the original nut from this yoke and save the other one for if I had to reinstall that small yoke. There's no cross hole drilled in the shaft. I can't put a cotter pin in. I'm glad I noticed that. I need to use the self-locking nut, otherwise it might actually come off. So if you ever run into this situation, check for the cotter pin hole, because if it isn't there, you got a problem. But luckily I have this nut, so I'm good. We'll be getting somewhere here soon. Now before I pull this drive shaft apart and take this CV off, I want to make sure it actually will work now that I have the yokes in place. When I measured it, I've got a little over 24, like 24 1/4 center to center. This thing goes down to below 23. So we got plenty, we got over an inch of plunge. And extending it, we're at 25 1/2. So we have over an inch either way to move. So this drive shaft actually looks perfect for some reason. So let's get this thing off here and bolt it in. This CV joint style drive shaft, they've got a centering bearing that keeps those all in position. There. Got the corners rounded and everything. So apparently a J10 drive shaft fits an FC-150 perfectly. Go figure. But now I think I have four-wheel drive. Now that I got four-wheel drive here, I can only think of one thing to do. We need to try it out. So let's go have some off-road fun. Visibility is fantastic. You can look straight down at the trailer. When I removed those shocks, I made some fantastic tie-down points. Just hook right to them. That's a problem. I probably shouldn't have put that right next to me. I think I'm going to let this cool down for a little bit. I think I'm going to have to do something about that cooling system. I don't think it's quite adequate. Well, I'm stuck here waiting for it to cool down. Taking a look at it, looks like that front axle seems to be articulating pretty nicely. I think that suspension's working. It feels too stiff. I think the stiffness is in the back. Yeah, the rear has a little bit of an angle, but it's a lot more level. I think those helper springs need to come out and let that flex a little more. I'm going to check the tire clearance. Looks like it's pretty good. We're still about 2 inches off the bump stop, so we still could move a little more. But looks like I have the room here, so I think I got this body in the right position. I'll do it once over. The hose clamp seems to be holding the muffler on fine. The zip ties are holding the fan on fine, even though the fan doesn't really work particularly well. Yep, tie down gas tank, perfect. Tie down on the battery, looks fine. And I think basically the whole thing's in good shape. And that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed what I'm doing here, because I got at least one more part with the covering and, you know, minor stuff like brakes and things. But I'm going to actually take this thing out and do some riding after I got done building it, because it shows a lot of promise. Now the motor's cooled down. I'm below 190, so I'm going to try to drive this thing out of here. Had a lot of fun today, and had a lot of fun building this thing. And hopefully you guys are having fun too. We'll see you next time.